It's an honor for me to call on the Honorable Chief Whip for the opposition, the Honorable Member Mr. Christopher Jones, to make his contribution.
Thank you very much, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, permit me, like my colleague earlier, extend condolences to the Honorable Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, Chief Whip of the People's Progressive Party Civic, Madam Gail Teixeira, on the passing of her father. We on this side of the House, Comrade Speaker, hopes that herself and family take comfort in the words of Psalm 35, which states, "Weeping may endure but a night, but joy cometh in the morning." May his soul rest in peace. Comrade Speaker, I certainly want to take the opportunity as well to extend our appreciation to the staffers of the Ministry of Finance, particularly those from the budget agency. We know that in the preparation of these budgets, there would have been long nights and even weekends away from their family members. And for that, sir, we want to register our appreciation to them. The content herein, however, Comrade Speaker, comes from the subject minister with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, to whom I must say have missed the mark. And if I'm to use the words of former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the Honorable Minister have missed the mark bigly. Comrade Speaker, on Friday, the 12th of February, like scenes from a scary movie, the Honorable Minister of Finance presented a document to this House under the theme, "A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism, Reliance, Resilience." I must submit, Comrade Speaker, that this document should be renamed and must be renamed to capture accurately the intended purpose and trajectory it aims to take the country on. A path to tragedy, economic deprivation, economic degradation, and failure. This would be most fitting given the pillars on which this travesty was built. Comrade Speaker, like my colleague before, spoke about the need for consultation. And of course, she alluded to the Constitution of Guyana, a living document in which it is enshrined in Article 13 about the rights, the roles of the citizen have in the decision-making processes of the state. Comrade Speaker, when one looks at budget presentation years gone by from several ministers of the People's Progressive Party Civic, and during the debate from members of the opposition, whether it be WPA, PNC, AFC, and the list goes on, is that all of those members of parliament in their presentation, sir, makes reference to the non-consultation on the part of the People's Progressive Party Civic. I want to place on record here and now, sir, that under the APNU-AFC government, in putting together its first budget in 2015, extended an invitation to the People's Progressive Party Civic for consultation, of which they attended the first one, and every year after that, in which an invitation was extended to them, they did not turn up. In the preparation for these budgets, Comrade Speaker, the opposition was not consulted. And these are, sir, or we are rather, the principal stakeholders. If one is to use those numbers from the Guyana Elections Commission that was used to install the regime, you would see it speaks to the APNU-AFC 49% of the electorate. And therefore, sir, if the PPP is serious about one Guyana and oneness and the Ministry of Happiness, one would have expected them to have consultation with us. Comrade Speaker, after listening to 5 hours presentation of the national budget, one gets the impression that Guyana is immune to the coronavirus. Here again in 2021, like Budget 2020, it does not speak of a COVID recovery plan. for those small and large-scale businesses that have suffered tremendously due to the debilitating effects of the pandemic. Some of those businesses were forced to close permanently. It is no secret that hotels and other entities in the tourism industries have seen major decline in business, resulting in a loss of thousands of jobs. And of course, Comrade Speaker, the more than 1,500 public servants that were terminated by the People's Progressive Party Civic during the pandemic. Comrade Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to mention the pain and agony the Guyanese people have been subjected to over the past 7 months of this installed regime momentary term in office. We've seen this regime blatant apathy for human life and well-being, with the magnitude of dismissals in the public sector, politicization of the discipline services, mismanagement of public funds, and their gross ineptitude to adequately put systems in place to deal with the COVID pandemic. And how could I forget the PPPC's blatant disregard for the rule of law? Mr. Speaker, it certainly would be remiss of me if I did not mention the countless broken promises made to the Guyanese people who were deceived by a fiction presented to them in a useless document during the 2020 elections campaign, the PPP's manifesto, which you could have read page 1, 2, and 3 on the lampposts of Sheriff Street. Budget 2021 to be based on a few objectives, which speaks to a proposed path in which the country is expected supposedly to thrive. But what the Minister of Finance and the regime fail to understand is that their inability to address the challenges and economic hardship posed by the pandemic, which has left large numbers of Guyanese in a state of bother. Comrade Speaker, Guyana has been placed on level 4 of the CDC's index for COVID-19, and yet the regime is bent on relaxing guidelines only to satisfy their cabal in the private sector while bullying public servants to work in harrowed condition that puts them and their loved ones at high risk of contracting the virus. Comrade Speaker, it is a clear indication that the regime continues to believe, as they did during the early phase of the pandemic, that COVID-19 is a hoax. Their failure to adequately put systems in place and to bring to this honorable House a COVID recovery plan is testimony to their incompetence and lack of leadership. Comrade Speaker, in my 2020 budget presentation, I emphasized that what was frightening to every Guyanese was the fact that Budget 2020 was devoid of a COVID recovery plan. It is even more alarming that almost a year into the pandemic, this regime presents Budget 2021 in this House similarly in scope and also devoid of a COVID recovery plan. Comrade Speaker, the sum of $7 billion have been appropriated for the disbursement to households in all regions of this country as part of the COVID-19 cash grant relief for the year 2020. However, this project has been a total disgrace and abuse on the taxpayers' dollars, since many households and communities hard hit by the pandemic have not benefited due to corruption, discrimination, and the lack of empathy. In many instances, Comrade Speaker, the tenants were overlooked simply because of their alleged alignment with the coalition, denying them the opportunity to benefit from the project, as if the project was only designed and intended to benefit supporters and friends of this corrupt regime. Or perhaps, Comrade Speaker, it's exactly that the intent. From all appearances, Comrade Speaker, Budget 2021 does not cater for a stimulus package for small and large-scale businesses. There are no stimulus package for those in the hotel and hospitality industry. There is no allocation which speaks to a second tranche disbursement of the COVID-19. There is no funds that speaks to those thousands of Guyanese across this country that are currently holding a pink slip and awaiting the second tranche of the disbursement. This budget, Comrade Speaker, does not speak to that. Let's talk equity, Comrade Speaker. It was under the APNU ARC government that this country saw major transformational development, infrastructure upgrades, and new transformative projects across this country in every region. Comrade Speaker, I invite you to go to the Barima Winey region, Region 1. And of course, sir, you, no stranger to the hustings of this country with the TUF. If you go there now, sir, the instant you deplane, you are walking on paved roads built by the APNU AFC government. And those roads, Comrade Speaker, will take you all the way to the Kumaka Market waterfront, where under the People's Progressive Party Civic, the Kumaka Market was slipping into the river, and for 23 years they did absolutely nothing. It was the coalition government that put the revetment in place, and the vendors that ply their trade there, sir, now have access to a spanking new vendors arcade built by the coalition government. The next time you're there, Comrade Speaker, go to Hosorora Hill, where you will see a space, a green space that was created for rest and leisure. Or perhaps, Comrade Speaker, you turn your radio on, like many of the riverine communities in Hobadiah, Hotoquoy, Sacred Heart, St. Monica, the island, are now able to do and get access to Radio Mabaruma, where communication and access to information is readily available from the APNU ARC government. Go to the sub-region, Comrade Speaker. Go to Matakai sub-region. Port Kaituma, the same could be said there. Road construction by the APNU AFC government, what the People's Progressive Party Civic did not do in 23 years in office. Let's go to Lethem. Roads have been constructed, street lights have been erected, illuminating that bordering town with Brazil. But, Comrade Speaker, I'm happy that the Honorable Minister of Housing and Water is present in the House, so I can inform her or refresh the Honorable Member's memory that there are now 22 indigenous communities in the Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo region that now have access to potable water for the first time in Guyana's history. And of course, Comrade Speaker, this was in keeping with the Millennium Development Goal, which Guyana pledged to reduce the proportion of people without access to safe drinking water. Comrade Speaker, I invite you to go to the Patara Superior region, Region 8, particularly Madia, of which over the 23 years under the People's Progressive Party Civic, we have seen gold, diamond, and other minerals being extracted from the region, but no development going back to that region. It was under the APNU ARC government that the entire road network in Madia has been constructed. Comrade Speaker, these are some of the hallmarks of the coalition, and there are many more, of which I'm certain my colleague David Patterson will deal with. But as well, Comrade Speaker, it was the Bartica, Lethem, Mabaruma, and Madia that were all bestowed township status after 2 successful local government elections were held under the APNU AFC government, of which The autocratic People's Progressive Party Civic never attempted to hold. Comrade Speaker, if one is to look at the voting pattern of those regions I mentioned, you will see the history will tell you, sir, that regions 1, 8, and 9 have always voted for the People's Progressive Party Civic. But notwithstanding that, Comrade Speaker, and that is why we speak of equity, it was under the AP and UAFC government that those regions for the first time saw real transformation development. Equity, fairness. Comrade Speaker, this nation is still coming to grips with the lack of leadership shown and the vindictiveness post-August 2nd, 2020, where to date over 1,500 public servants were terminated from their jobs without any justifiable reasons. Mothers, fathers, husbands, and wives, most of whom, sir, are the breadwinners of their respective homes. Sir, these people don't know at the end of this month, February, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent. They don't know how they're going to pay their mortgage, how GPL will be paid, how GTT, the internet, which is critical now for their children to access education, they don't know how they're going to pay that. The school fees for the respective schools that the children are from. Comrade Speaker, these public servants who have been terminated by the People's Progressive Party Civic don't know how they're going to put food on the table tomorrow. Car loans, UG fees, courts, lucky dollar singers, and the list goes on. None of these public servants or former public servants have any idea as to how they're going to pay these bills. Meanwhile, Comrade Speaker, the PPPC members who are also ministers at the end of this month, when those public servants have no idea how they're going to pay those utilities, the PPPC members who sit in this house, who are also ministers of the government, Comrade Speaker, will take home $1.2 million. Paid for by the remaining public servants and the taxpayers of this country. Apart from the $1.2 million, sir, they will have their light bills paid by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. They will have their phone bills paid by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. They will have both cellular and internet services paid for by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. They will have security that will be paid for by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. They will have a chauffeur paid for by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. They will have access to a state vehicle paid for by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. And of course, the unlimited duty-free afforded to them by the public servants and the taxpayers of this country. So while the People's Progressive Party, civic members of parliament, and ministers of the government enjoying the big life or the high life, the average public servant in this country, sir, when you look at this document, does not articulate anything for them in the coming months. Budget 2021 is nothing but a fallacy. To public servants, since the budget presented by the Honorable Minister, inclusive of its measures, does not take into account the direct needs of public servants, nor does it seek to satisfy the promises made only to score cheap political points. I can only describe the acts of this uncaring regime as unconscionable, cruel, and unsympathetic. For the livelihoods of the hard-working public servants across this country, if we are to mirror this with Gaisuko, sir, we see budget 2021 has in excess of $2 billion for this failing industry. that supports that's supposed to be the mainstream of Guyana's economy. But instead, sir, Gaisuco is the bloodsucker on the backs of the taxpayers of this country. That is a reality. But, sir, it was the Minister of Agriculture who posited on NCN and Budget in Focus, and I quote, Gaisuco is not profitable, and all he wants is for Gaisuco to break even. Comrade Speaker, these are the words of the Honorable Minister. Upon investing billions upon billions of the taxpayers' dollars, monies into this industry, which can only be described as pouring monies into a catastrophic abyss. Guyanese, Comrade Speaker, cannot be satisfied and will not be satisfied with the notion that Gaisuco simply break even. This industry, sir, is dead and it should be laid to rest. Fairness. Comrade Speaker, lest we forget, and let me remind the members of this honorable house, it was the APNU AFC government who catapulted the minimum wage for public servants from $39,500 pre-May 2015 to $70,000 2019. During the budget presentation, the honorable member failed to announce any increase in wages and salaries for public servants. Upon public pressure, the nation was then told that a sum of $10 billion is allocated in the budget for the revision of wages and salaries for public servants. Comrade Speaker, you've been, as I mentioned before, in the hustings of this country for a number of years. If I could use the Creole terms, you have been in the husting for donkey years. And you know the People's Progressive Party Civic. If, like they did with the manifesto that can only be located on Sheriff Street for Lampole, that they posted on Lampole 4, page 4, that public servants will receive 50% increase in wages and salaries. Sir, if in this budget, and you know the political party I speak of, wouldn't they have plastered, similarly like they did on the lampposts on Sheriff Street, that public servants will receive 50% increase? Comrade Speaker, if I'm to juxtapose what played out in Budget Presentation 2020, when questions were asked whether public servants will benefit from salary increases, we were told then too, sir, that yes, the public servants will receive increases in salaries, but only to learn a few days before the conclusion of the year that they will receive a $25,000 one-off grant. That is what we were told. While on the other hand, Comrade Speaker, the sugar industry benefited twice from Budget 2020 and now Budget 2021. Where's the equity? Comrade Speaker, I would want to quickly, before my time exhausts itself, is make reference to the budget speech by the honorable member, page 2, 1.6, in which the honorable member, sir, chronicle, as he referred to it, as phases. A particular phase, sir, that he referenced to is phase from 1992 to 2015. And he states here, and I quote, "We're an era of economic restoration and reconstruction and all of that between that period." But you see, sir, one would have expected that if the honorable minister is chronicling events 1992-2015, one would have expected the honorable member to take the opportunity to inform all on sundry of some of the atrocities that occur during that period under their administration. And I would want to, sir, posit 1997, in which former President Janet Jagan threw the court writ over her shoulder. And the then Ghana Elections Commission Chairman, Mr. Dunat Singh, responded to her and saying that was good. But for the rest of us in Guyana, sir, we saw the beginning of the decay of democracy and the rule of law in this country. The said GCOM chairman, Mr. Do Not Singh, Comrade Speaker, as an example, then went on to become the Attorney General of the People's Progressive Party Civic. And of course, sir, the honorable member did not chronicle the decade of death in this country under their administration. And I make reference here, sir, when the streets in our villages and town were filled with the stench of lifeless bodies, in which a sitting then minister of government with responsibility for Ronald Gadraj, Home Affairs, the former Minister of Home Affairs, Ronald Gadraj, was embroiled as having and operating a phantom death squad in Guyana, Comrade Speaker, of which same is responsible for the deaths of over 400 persons. Comrade Speaker, during that period, that the honorable member did not chronicle 1992 to 2015. He didn't chronicle the massacres that took place in this country under their watch. There was the Bartica massacre, the Luziknan massacre, the Lindo Creek massacre, the Agricola massacre. And a very sitting minister, sir, of the People's Progressive Party Civic, Mr. Sadly Osa, when his home was invaded and he was slaughtered along with his siblings, and under the People's Progressive Party Civic, for their own sitting minister that was slaughtered, they did not even commission a COI. They did not even do that. Comrade Speaker, during that period, for the first time in Guyana's history, you had U.S. diplomat that was kidnapped in this country under the People's Progressive Party Civic's watch. You've had, sir, sitting ministers of the People's Progressive Party Civic that had their visas revoked. And just to name a few, Ronald Gadraj, Clement Rohi, and Dr. Leslie Ramsamy. During that period, sir, 1992 to 2015, Guyana.
Honorable member, you said Leslie Ramsamy?
Dr. Leslie Ramsamy.
Okay, I thought he was a citizen too.
Sorry?
I thought he was a citizen of the United States.
I'm just making the point, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, during the period when the sitting ministers of the People's Progressive Party Civic had their visas revoked, the United States, sir, dubbed Guyana under the People's Progressive Party Civic as a narco state. Where even, sir, in an Al Jazeera new report, the Al Jazeera report, the reporter said that the word on the street in Guyana is that the drug exporters exported drugs in everything except the national anthem under the PPP. So, sir, when one wants to chronicle the history of this country, sir, you mustn't be selective. You mustn't be selective. Comrade Speaker, we even had, in that period, sir, when the sitting Minister of Health, Dr. Leslie Ramsamy, used the Ministry of Health letterhead to purchase a sophisticated spy laptop. And then when a vehicle was intercepted by the Guyana police force at Sparandam, they found the said laptop in the possession of a known individual. All of that was obtained under the People's Progressive Party Civic. So we want to juxtapose then to now. And of course, Comrade Speaker, earlier my colleague Amanza Walton Desir sought to speak about the elephant in the room, of which no one wants to speak of, but it is a reality. And what she mentioned, sir, is factual. And I'll take you back to the same 1992-2015 period when no less of a person than the Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Roger Luncheon, on being cross-examined, when the question was asked why there are no African Guyanese who are part of the Foreign Service, he said, and I quote, that they are not qualified. All of that obtained during that period. And if one is to juxtapose the 23 years of the PPP to what has obtained in the past 8 months, you see a same pattern emerging once again. Because within a few weeks or months of the PPP being in office, you saw 1.5 tons of cocaine intercepted, emanated from Guyana. Then you saw in Belgium 11.5 tons of cocaine intercepted, emanated from Guyana. It's like we said before, sir.
Honorable Chief Whip, I have to intercept you now to ask that you beg for an extension.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I respectfully beg that the Honorable Chief Whip be given 5 more minutes to complete his presentation.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chief Whip, you may continue.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. And you juxtapose that. Now, throughout the streets across this country, it is known that the AP and UAFC, we said to our people, let the blow, blow, blow. But clearly, within a few months of the People's Progressive Party Civic being in office, it's let the cocaine flow. And that has returned to this country. Like the many crimes and murders that took place during the period that the Honorable Minister quoted here, 1992 to 2015, sir, that are still unsolved. Reference could be made here today, sir, to the 3 young lads from the West Coast, Berbice, the Henry boys, and Narsing, who to date the families can't get closure. The same story used to occur before, and it's happening again. Comrade Speaker, Budget 2021, as my colleagues and I mentioned before, is lacking in equitable distribution across this country. It has no vision, no plan. The budget seems to be so disconnected between what is said here and what the intended objective is to achieve. We cannot support this budget, Comrade Speaker. We cannot support this budget, Comrade Speaker. But you see, sir, when we speak about democracy, and of course, ensuring that that section 13 of the Constitution, which is enshrined in that living document, becomes a reality. The honorable members, as they are heckling, they are doing exactly what they did in 1992-2015 in Parliament. And that is, they say to the opposition, you will have your say, but we will have our way. And it's the same thing has returned to this country. Same Ministry of Happiness. Comrade Speaker, as I said in the inception, if one is to use the numbers from the Guyana Elections Commission that was used to install the administration, it speaks to, sir, 49%, 51%. In this House, sir, we all together represent this nation. And if truly the People's Progressive Party Civic is serious about making real one Guyana, they will come to that realization that to move this country forward, the principal stakeholders that are sitting in this House must have a say in the decision-making processes of this country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It's now time for us to get the contribution of the Honorable Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister, the Honorable Warren K.E. McCoy.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues of the government side, those of the opposition, I am aware, Mr. Speaker, from my own intelligence gathering that the APNU AFC section across there intended 2 things to target me this afternoon: heckled me out or walk out. They intended, from my own intelligence, look, it's written here. I have it written before the exit, it's here. So my intelligence gathering must be commended, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy this afternoon that it is really a demonstration from the opposition side that the powerhouses on this side will be the powerhouses, and they will have to run continually for the remaining of this debate. Mr. Speaker, I listened all day to what the members on the opposition side said during this budget debate. I listened all day. And guess which words came to mind? I will use the words of Lord Intruder of Trinidad and Tobago in 1953, when he said in that beautiful Calypsonian song that says, back to back, belly to belly, I don't give a damn, I done dead already. The opposition, Jambi Jamboree, all morning, that's what we heard from the opposition side, Mr. Speaker. Jambi Jamboree. And they come here today pretending to you, to all the people of this country, that they mean well and that they mean business. Such a bankrupt, irrelevant opposition trying to foist on the people of Guyana some goodness about themselves. And this, we must tear down all of the mass behind these people called the opposition. Mr. Speaker, we must take off the mask. I heard this afternoon, well, maybe I should start from what I heard this morning, the pink slip. I don't know if it was a showing of his slip or if he meant the pink slip that we giving, have the household sign in the COVID cash grant relief. But the pink slip, Mr. Speaker, which is being used for the COVID cash grant relief, is a slip that we are proud to be associated with in the People's Progressive Party Civic, because it represents the second phase of a program that seeks to bring relief to the simple man and woman, to every household in this country, and we intend to honor the pink slip. Just like we gave out the first phase, and every Guyanese, whether you go to Region 1, wherever you go, they are happy. And they know it is the best the government can do, given the circumstances and what we have as our resources available to us, financial resources. And you should hear right across Guyana the expressions of happiness. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue to make our people happy right across this country during our first term, second term, third term, fourth term, fifth term in government. Because it represents who we are as a party, who we are as a government who is always concerned about the welfare of the people. And then they know that the lies or the misrepresentations will not pass any one of us in this house. When the honorable member, Christopher Jones, stood up just now to say that ministers take home $1.2 million a month. Absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. No minister of this government, with the exception of the AG and the Prime Minister, takes home $1.2 million. None. And we are not the government of the APNU AFC that carried up this salary when they got into government. We have not taken a single increase in salaries as a government. So they can't compare us with them. And therefore, we need to set the record straight on that matter. And Mr. Speaker, in our manifesto, and I have it here, the electronic version on my phone, we, in our manifesto, spoke to several promises, one of which was salary increase for public servants. We never attached a percentage to those increases. So when the Honorable Member Christopher Jones stood there this afternoon suggesting and misrepresent rather to this nation that the PPP manifesto promised 50% increase in salary, again, it's another lie. It's another lie. And Mr. Speaker, as I go along this afternoon, you will hear me speak to what our plans are in this government and the budget of 2021 and what it means for the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, my contribution here this afternoon, of course, I couldn't continue without thanking the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh, Senior Minister within the Office of the President, responsible for finance, for his budget presentation and for taking us through a program for development and a program of action that will see people's lives get better in 2021 all across this country. Mr. Speaker, it is a transformative budget. Mr. Speaker, we, as His Excellency in his inaugural message to us, said that as a nation, to us and the nation, the budget was framed to reflect the unprecedented juncture in our nation's history on which we stand. We stand together, he said, I quote, on the cusp of what can be a new economic era of prosperity in which all will share now and from which future generations will benefit. Of what can be a new economic era of prosperity, this note of caution was struck by President Ali as he warned that we must not fool ourselves that this new economic era will happen without our collective effort. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency also admonished the Honorable House to recognize and embrace the ominous realization that there has never been a greater moment when we as Guyanese need to stand as one and to secure the benefits of our natural resources and to protect our sovereignty, the right to make decisions in our national interests and our territorial integrity. Sadly, however, again, I must lament that the honorable members of Parliament representing the government, the governing party, this is the PPP Civic, were the only ones in this hollow chambers to stand shoulder to shoulder with the president as he so eloquently articulated the transformational agenda for our first term in office. We were the only ones here, Mr. Speaker, because those elected to attend the people's business for development in sync with the government, those in the opposition benches ate and then went on the road. They were outside doing perhaps what they're best known for, protesting, heckling, squabbling, and of course, trying to obfuscate and to be obfuscate and derelicting their sacred duty of service to the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, regardless of our moment in history, regardless of the historic nature of the occasion, regardless of the expectations of the working class people of this country, the opposition seems hell-bent in its true characteristic form on hell-raising just for the sake of it in yet another spurious attempt to subvert democracy without the appetite for the lazy, vacuous retort to racism and race baiting. And Mr. Speaker, nothing upsets me most than this kind of behavior from the opposition. The only thing can be analyzed by the opposition, any subject, any given subject from rain to romance, it has ethnicity, it has race. It's nothing of substance, nothing that contributes to intellectual stability, nothing that will be able to say that it could be another shade or some other variable of a particular subject. That it's totally upsetting, absolutely. And we in this country must let this opposition know that we will take away the last card they have, which is the card of racism, because the people of this country want us as one and want us to unite now. They must not get away with it, absolutely not. And so the only thing they can come here with, everything is through the eyes of racism and race and ethnicity. We heard the Honorable Member Amanza here this morning. Mr. Speaker, they're all brazen political skullduggery and the anti-democratic techniques which raised their ugly heads last March to August in this country must be made to crawl back under the rocks and allow this country to finally rise above the petty, visionless, and finally fulfill her true destiny. Mr. Speaker, the budget 2021, which provides a clear path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience, will do just that. This budget will lay new foundations of resilience in our neighborhoods and communities across this country, block by block and door to door, empowering and transforming the lives of Guyanese from Buxton to Berbice, from Liliendal to Linden, and from Lusignan to Cato, to eschew the opposition's divisive tactics, to confront their lazy dereliction, and to resist all attempts of their unpatriotic derailment of our decade-old march to fulfill our destiny. Mr. Speaker, our senior minister in the office of the President, with responsibility for finance, has laid the largest, boldest, and most transformative budget to date at a whooping $383.1 billion, fully financed without any new taxes. Dr. Ashley Singh so aptly reminded this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, that the PBPC government has chartered a course outlined in our manifesto and elaborated by His Excellency the President that once fulfilled will see us seizing those opportunities and will guide us to a destiny of which our foreparents have dreamt for generations. He hastened to caution, however, Mr. Speaker, that the task will not be easy, but neither it is impossible. One thing is for sure, and seek haplessly to derail the unprecedented transformation coming to this country and to the homes and lives of all Guyanese. But let it be clear that the shenanigans and mechanisms of the now irrelevant APNU, AFC, PNC will never again be allowed to stymie the progress of national unity and nation building, to jeopardize the coming prosperity of Guyanese, and to wreak havoc on their own nation in their cowardly, seditious attempt to subvert our democracy and keep their big lies alive. In their selfish, egotistical quest to try to resuscitate their political monsters of the dark days of yesteryear. Mr. Speaker, the PNC must understand that it is now a relic, that it is an ideology of division and separation, is no longer a viable option of profitable pursuit. It must smell its own obnoxious flatulence, Mr. Speaker, and quickly come to grips with the reality that this is a new Guyana beckoning, that this generation, this generation will not tolerate this type of behavior. Mr. Speaker, as my responsibility for public information and communication, I must say that in this beautiful country of ours, through the astute leadership of the Prime Minister and team and I, we've already been at the wheel for the past 6 months with much progress to clean up the melancholic mess of the last 5 years of the APNU AFC. We have already successfully installed new and more competent boards at state agencies, and which includes GNBA, GNPL, National Communications Network, the Guyana National Newspapers Limited, and we are successfully installed management teams to take us forward and to make advancement in these entities. We've commenced building robust systems, both locally and internationally, to coordinate the information and communication two-way flow between the government and the citizenry, to ensure that the people are aware of government's policies, programs, projects, and how they can play a role and benefit. We have been hard at work directing public concerns appropriately to the government with regards to policy implementation, while at the same time channeling threats designed to upset the tranquility, stability, and security of the state. We have been working to improve the state of affairs across the media spectrum with regards to the adherence to universal principles of ethics and responsibility, the quality and accuracy of information, and the swift evolution to more cutting-edge practices and platforms. We have also, Mr. Speaker, configured a robust integrated network for competencies, generating programs and strategies to manage and build the image of the government and the country through a revamped state media apparatus, which is in progress. Our government information department, along with other units, to be able to achieve this. Through the regional international media network, we are establishing partnerships that will allow for the effective marketing of Guyana and its products while showcasing the vast opportunities in the new economic frontiers expected to build our new multi-dimensional economy. Mr. Speaker, the Public Affairs Secretariat has already designed new integrated communication program as well, and initiatives to counteract the harmful race-baiting tactics of the opposition with a view of fostering national unity in our diversity. Following the seditious machinations of the APNU AFC coalition, Mr. Speaker, to prevent the March 2020 democratic return of the People's Progressive Party civic government, and over the past 6 months since the will of the people prevailed, we have painstakingly repairing the broken stakeholders' relations among faith-based organizations and civil society with a view of quickly rekindling the participatory approach to governance characteristic of previous PPPC administrations. Mr. Speaker, quite unlike the aloof, hierarchical, and classist APNU AFC coalition, the Office of the Prime Minister and my Secretariat have been out and about among the people with the rest of the government. His Excellency President Dr. Irfan Ali has returned the coalition's aloofness and arrogance on its head.
Honorable Minister, you will need an extension to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask for 5 minutes extension for my colleague to conclude.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. You may continue towards your conclusion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So I may continue with stating that we have acquired state-of-the-art virtual property, including equipment and domains and content sharing platforms to reach Guyanese audiences wherever in the world they might be, because this year, Mr. Speaker, the transformation of our beloved country begins, and all progressive Guyanese must be involved. We all must be consumed. Mr. Speaker, because of time, I would not be able to go as deep as I would like into many of the things that we have been doing in this government and in the area I'm responsible for. But I also want to say that the state media, will be working very hard to make sure that we have a state media that can provide the needs to our citizens in terms of providing information and communicating to our populace in general.
Honorable Minister, let me just correct myself. You started at 5:37. Your 30 minutes is 6:07. So you do have some time.
Thank you. I'm happy to know that. Yes. Our strategy approaches, Mr. Speaker, will advance the evidence of government policies, build relationships with our key target groups and stakeholders, engage with other civil society organizations, and communicate government's work using all the platforms. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, on national development projects and programs, national events, the work of civil society, local government, security, education, culture, business, youth, innovation, sports, community transformation, national unity and patriotism, among a myriad of other areas, will now form part of the tapestry of our work for nation building. The Public Affairs Secretary will leave no stone unturned in helping to bolster the image of our country on the international stage, in undergirding the development agenda of the government and enabling free and open discourse with the people, while championing national and community achievements to inspire and lend impetus to the transformative momentum of the People's Progressive Party civic government. Our support and services will span the entire government and spectrum and be available to access to all. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2021 offers a transformative path for Guyana and all its citizens. Like the rest of the country that have been inspired and energized by the positive prospects of significant renewal, growth, and transformation in Budget 2021, members of the opposition in this honorable House could somersault from their folly and join the rest of us on this path. They could still choose at this very moment, Mr. Speaker, or perhaps at the end of these debates, to turn about from their reckless abandonment of this country and support our efforts to unite this nation in common purpose, that of building a path to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience. I will not be holding my breath to see that happen, perhaps, and Mr. Speaker, but rather I will take comfort in the groundswell of support coming in from all the corners of this country as the Guyanese people continue to overwhelmingly support progress and a government that truly cares and truly cares about their welfare. Mr. Speaker, we have had so much said about the budget, not only by us on this side and by those on the other side, which of course is nothing much to go by if you listen to them all over there. But the citizens of this country have all been talking about Budget 2021 and what it means for them. Simple, ordinary man and woman. They've all been talking about the Budget 2021, what it means. Certainly a lot for their lives, their family, a lot and enough to take them a step forward into their own development. And Mr. Speaker, this is just a sample. This is just a sample. If we look across the media, and social media in particular, you will see the views reflected there in the dozens, in the hundreds perhaps. And I want to say that this is by our own design. We designed this budget, we designed the program for people, and we designed it for people, and therefore we expect them to understand and to be comforted and to be supportive of this program. And so it is not just a budget that came to being and in a way and fashion that the opposition would like to suggest. Nobody had an input except the few of us here. Nobody else had an input in this budget. Many of these individuals I've just highlighted here, and others, stakeholders, civil society, they had an opportunity to make an input into Budget 2021. So when the praises on the budget, and I saw on the social media just a short while ago, a program by one of these NGO, the AmSham, or one of these organizations, talking about Budget 2021. And I'm sure they would be identifying with all the good things, the measures in this budget to be able to tell us that we have made a good attempt to bring a program for 2021 that will improve their lives, to improve business, to make people happier. You know, Mr. Speaker, if you really examine the opposition and all that they've been saying, and given the fact that they have almost been forcefully removed from government, almost forcefully, their behavior is common, the characteristics of bitter people. What are those characteristics? Generally, the characteristics would be reflective of their desire to make someone else suffer. All right? A desire to make someone else suffer. Full of vindictiveness. They wade rather in self-pity. They are looking for a fight. They have a sociopathic pride. They are drowning in animosity and resentment. Those characteristics, don't they aptly fit those on that side? Aptly so. Aptly. And Mr. Speaker, we have to understand this country has had too much of the bitterness, too much of this type of behavior,
Mr. Speaker,
too much of the venom.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Deputy.
I stand on a point of order. The honorable member is on order number 45-6, I think, where he is imputing my character. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, continue. Just be careful with respect to those on that side, the honorable
Thank,
members on that side, and if you want to say
thank,
all, I think the deputy leader is making an observation.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Schumann, the honorable member, is exempted from that. He's not part of that group, and he has never been one of those persons I described just now. And so, Mr. Speaker, so we have a good opportunity to bring this country together, to stop seeing everything through the eyes of race. As we have seen so far from the opposition at New AFC, every comment has to do with race and ethnicity. And you know what is really, really worrying as well? Is that when they were in government, they did nothing. Nothing for some of the people who they try to make claim as though they have transport for a certain set of people in this country. They did nothing for them. It was all about a clique, a small group who took government money and buy bracelets, bought brooches, beds, and all the other things we've heard about. My honorable colleague Joseph Hamilton spoke about it this morning. And they went on a journey to grab and to hustle. And that's why they're out of government. And they don't even recognize it. They don't even recognize it. The hustle is over. So, Mr. Speaker, it is for us in this House to make Guyana work for all. And I say to you that we on this side are committed to making Guyana work for all of us by ensuring that the goods and services, the resources, those allocated in the budget of 2021, those that will come in the future, are for every single Guyanese boy, woman, child, family. And so, with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I would like to give my full support to Budget 2021 and to say that we are on a good journey to prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Member, Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Vikash Ramkissoon. Please make your contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Permit me to join, Mr. Speaker, with those who have expressed congratulations to Senior Minister with responsibilities of finance under the Office of the President, Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, and his team of dedicated staff members for once again producing budget estimates for 2021 under the theme, A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience, and for continuing to make all of us as Guyanese proud. Mr. Speaker, this budget is presented to Guyana a mere 6 months since the People's Progressive Party Civic was declared the winner of the March 2nd, 2020 general and regional elections, and Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali was sworn in as the 9th Executive President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this mandate that was given by the people and the citizens of Guyana is a mandate to restore constitutionality, to restore law and order, economic stability, sustained economic growth, and to return our dear land Guyana to her position of pride respect, and admiration by her citizens locally and in the diaspora, as well as her friends and allies over the world. Mr. Speaker, when the debate began this morning, the honorable member on the opposite side of this House began by telling us two things. One, she made mention about parliamentary democracy. And two, she resorted to tell this honorable House that she is a student of history. Mr. Speaker, there is a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. More importantly, we must consider that those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Mr. Speaker, lessons from the past provide valuable insights for the present and understandings for the future. Therefore, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this House, it is important to look back in order for us to shape our future. Mr. Speaker, in so reflecting back, it is very sad that a very honorable member is missing from this House so that we can give her some history lessons. Mr. Speaker, let's go to their history. It is undeniable historical fact that the People's National Congress, now perhaps they have a deed poll, so they are now APNU AFC, they rigged elections in this country from 1968, 1973, 1980, and 1985. They also rigged the referendum of 1978. Mr. Speaker, in 1992, 1997, and 2001, when they lost the elections, they organized protests. The People's National Congress organized protests that turned violent. Citizens of this country were beaten, robbed, and harassed in the streets of the nation's capital. Mr. Speaker, the then leader of the opposition coined the slogan, and that slogan was, slow fire, more fire. Slow fire, more fire, Mr. Speaker, that is the history. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member could not have had to go away this afternoon, because history lessons were about to be taught to them. Mr. Speaker, this legacy and value system within that political organization does not permit it to operate within democratic norms. For a matter of fact, the very DNA of that political party is a result of the shenanigans we saw in our last elections. Mr. Speaker, that political party is only about party paramountcy, totalitarian government, and lack of adherence to democratic norms. Of course, Mr. Speaker, when I speak of the honorable members on the opposite side of this House, I'm excluding the Honorable Mr. Schuman from this, because those honorable members ought to remember that a political party called the PNC, the People's National Congress, is a party that was responsible, and a government that was responsible for banning basic food items in this country and criminalizing the possession of basic food items such as flour. Mr. Speaker, a government which decides what the people will consume, how would that government allow the people to make a democratic choice of electing a government? The government under the PNC, the People's National Congress, nationalized or confiscated private property, resulting in the People's National Congress control over the economy. There was hardly, Mr. Speaker, any distinction between the People's National Congress and the state, or vice versa. Mr. Speaker, Guyana and Guyanese must never forget that a PNC flag was flown over the courts of appeal. And today, these honorable members on the opposite side that belongs to the APNU AFC, formerly the PNC, cannot come to this honorable House to preach democracy and parliamentary democracy to us. Mr. Speaker, members of that political grouping has no moral authority to speak about democracy. 28 years of PNC dictatorship and rigged elections destroyed Guyana. and reduced us to an officially described highly indebted economy. Mr. Speaker, when the People's Progressive Party Civic came into office in '92, we were kids, we knew what went on. Mr. Speaker, we had a total national debt of $2.1 billion US dollars. 96 cents of every dollar we earned used to go towards repayment of debt. By 2012, Mr. Speaker, in 1992, our per capita income was a mere $250 US dollars, and our GDP was a mere $371 million US dollars. By 2015, when the People's Progressive Party left government, our gross domestic product was $4,280 million US dollars, and our per capita income was somewhere around $5,580 US dollars. By 2012, Mr. Speaker, 10 cents of every dollar was used for the repayment of national debts. That is what the People's Progressive Party Civic did for this country. Manage the affairs of this country in a very prudent manner. Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC, I call them the PNC, failed to fulfill every manifesto promise they made to the Guyanese people during the 2015-2020 term. Their much touted 100-day plan is yet to commence. But instead, we were hit by one scandal after the next. In America, there was a famous TV serial scandal. The Shonda Rhimes TV serial scandal. Mr. Speaker, they have enough material for the revival of that program in the AP and UAFC. I will list some of them here. The Durban Park scandal, the drug bond scandal, the gold bracelet scandal, the Demerara Harbour Bridge feasibility scandal, the Larry London birth certificate scandal, the barbershop scandal, the Ocean View COVID hospital scandal. And Mr. Speaker, and if that was not enough, we had the firing of 7,000 sugar workers and 2,000 CSO workers, the closure of 4 sugar estates, illegally appointing the chairman of GCOM in breach of our constitution, the loss of no confidence votes and refusal to call an election, Mr. Speaker, and illegally occupying government for almost 12 months. And on top of that, insult to injury, Mr. Speaker, we were told and we were listening to a campaign of decency and honesty. Mr. Speaker, there were blatant attempts to rig the elections and intimidating and harassing the international accredited election observers. Mr. Speaker, when they demitted office on the 2nd of August 2020, the Bank of Guyana report showed $83.2 billion in overdraft, and the Treasury bill was another $77 billion. Mr. Speaker, these are just grains of sand on the beach of the corruption under the APNU AFC. Mr. Speaker, our government has taken a proactive approach in managing the affairs of Guyana. We have taken very prudent economic measures to avert a financial crisis. August last year, under his leadership, the President, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, in a mere 6 months, we have our progress report. Part of it, we reversed VAT on electricity and water, provision of 25,000 COVID-19 relief per household, removal of VAT on building and construction materials, removal of VAT on cellular phones, removal of 25% corporate tax on education, removal of 25% corporate tax on health and VAT on medical supplies, old age pension increased to 25,000 effective 1st January 2021. Pensioners will benefit from free water services, $150 million to support COVID-19 frontline workers, 15,000 cash grant for school children effective from 1st January 2021, which was taken away from the children of this country. Uniform voucher allowance doubled to 4,000, removal of VAT on hinterland travel, removal of VAT on agricultural equipment, reduction in D&I charges. We began the process of reopening the closed sugar estates, We placed $27 billion already towards this. Mr. Speaker, our Honorable Minister within the Ministry of Housing reported this morning to the National Assembly 3,600 house lots were distributed from August to December. Mr. Speaker, more importantly, we have taken government to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, permit me to now turn our attention to the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, agriculture is the backbone of our national economy. Successive People's Progressive Party civic-led governments have long recognized this and have been placing tremendous emphasis on this sector. Mr. Speaker, the previous Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Noel Holder, he once said, previously, government has no responsibility to farmers. Rice is a private business. There was not just a slip of the tongue. Mr. Speaker, this represents the ideology of the People's National Congress. An ideology, Mr. Speaker, that does not view agriculture sector as the backbone of the economy, and one which provides the basic sustenance for citizens and now materials for industrialization. Mr. Speaker, Charles Jordan once said, "What people do not understand, they do not value. What they do not value, they will not protect. And what they do not protect, they will lose." Obviously, the honorable members on the opposite side of this House, coming from the APNU AFC, by virtue of their actions and utterances, refused to acknowledge and value agriculture. In so doing, they not only lost the opportunity to take natural resources and convert them into wealth, but also lost the right to govern in the process. Mr. Speaker, during 1957 to 1964 period, while Dr. Jagan was in government, he transformed the agriculture sector through sound agricultural practices, programs, and policies. Mr. Speaker, it was during this period that Guyana was referred to as the breadbasket of the Caribbean. The Black Bush Polder agricultural scheme was one of the largest in Guyana, and if not in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, sadly, after the People's National Congress was placed into office post-December 1964 elections, this gain was drastically reversed. Political pressures on food producers led to systematic destruction of Guyana's food potentials as a result of the anti-agricultural policies. Mr. Speaker, the first anti-agricultural policy was directed towards the rice industry. The government then, under the PNC, undemocratically imposed the Rice Marketing Board. Mr. Speaker, the People's National Congress government mandated that all the paddy be sold to the government at low price. It then resold the milled rice at the world market at a higher price, but refused to pass some of those profits directly to the farmers or to invest it in the agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, the rice industry was instead used as a cash cow for the then PNC government to fulfill its dictatorial agenda. Mr. Speaker, that PNC government removed subsidies on agricultural inputs and agricultural equipment and machinery. In the mid-70s, the PNC launched the FCH program, the Food, Clothing and Housing Program, which was a monumental failure because of its own spiteful programs against the agriculture, the farmers.
Honorable member, we will need an extension for you to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask for 5 minutes for the colleague to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before the 2015 elections, the APNU AFC promised the farmers, the rice farmers, $9,000 per bag of paddy. And they promised to transform the agricultural sector with incentives and subsidies. These promises, Mr. Speaker, were never realized. Instead, active steps were taken to punish the rice farmers. The closing of the sugar estates and putting on the breadline 7,000 sugar workers. And Mr. Speaker, adding insult to injury, the sugar workers had to resort to the courts against the Granger-led administration for payment of the legal severance. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party Civic in 2020 elections promised the sugar workers and Guyanese that the sugar estates will be reopened. Mr. Speaker, we are aggressively working towards achieving the same. Mr. Speaker, APNU AFC government increased land lease, rental charges, D&I charges, introduced VAT on agricultural inputs, removed subsidies on agricultural machinery. Mr. Speaker, these draconian agricultural policies and measures imposed by the APNU AFC government were reversed by our government in October 2020. Mr. Speaker, when this 12th Parliament brought bills to this honorable House to reverse all the increased fees and taxes imposed by the APNU AFC, the honorable members from that side of the House belonging to APNU AFC did not attend the session to defend these measures. Mr. Speaker, I know, and everyone knows, there is no defense. Mr. Speaker, this reversal will result in almost $1.3 billion annually back in the hands of farmers under the Mahaika-Maikoni-Abari Agricultural Development Authority, as pointed out by our Honorable Minister of Finance in his budget speech. Mr. Speaker, again, the APNU AFC launched a commission of inquiry into sugar, and that commission of inquiry recommended not to close any estates. Mr. Speaker, the Granger administration went against those very recommendations because it did not suit their agenda. The result, $70 million of our taxpayers' monies went to waste. Mr. Speaker, a $30 billion syndicated bond was acquired by the APNU AFC to reorganize the sugar industry, as what they said. $17 billion was spent and cannot be accounted for by the previous administration. And we must never forget also, there was an $80 million US signing bonus that went into the thin air. Nobody knew where it had gone. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to Region 3, the region I live all my life in this country. That region, Mr. Speaker, saw transformation in the housing sector under successive People's Progressive Party civic government. Mr. Speaker, we developed Tushin New Housing Scheme Phase 1 and 2, Zealot Phase 1, 2 and 3, Zeeburg de William, iFlood Housing Scheme, Lenora Housing Scheme, Cornelia Housing Scheme, Parfait Harmony Housing Scheme. Mr. Speaker, ask the APNU AFC in Region 3 which one they created. There is none, Mr. Speaker. That is why the people of this country, they witnessed, those who did not witness the PNC, they have seen the APNU AFC in action. And that is why we are here back in government and the APNU AFC is in the opposition. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture. I now call on the Honorable Member, Dr. Barry Ramsaran, to make his contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the meat of the discussion on the budget, the key document before us, I'd like to address the untruth I think, by one of the members over there. I think it might have been one of them. I don't recall which one. The PVPC never denied or never said that there was not a pandemic. Never. And that we need to get over quickly. And we should
Honorable
probably
member, you may need to speak directly into the mic.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Mr. Speaker, thanks for the opportunity to have a say on this topic. Before we get into the budget discussion, I'd like to point out some inaccuracies, 2 or 3 minutes. One of the speakers over there claimed boldly and inaccurately, and I dare say I think he did it deliberately, that the PPPC denied that there was any pandemic. That never happened, and you can check it. That there was never such a denial. As a matter of fact, our radio station and all media supporting us, we actively took the call to our members to take the necessary precautions. Remember the big crowd that gathered to watch the ballot boxes that were being stolen? Remember how it was just about the time when the pandemic was unfolding, and the party took measures to get those people to come off the streets, although thousands of them wanted to come, and we did it in a very orderly fashion, as recommended by the Ministry of Health and WHO. So I'd like to bring that. That's if we speak what lies. I don't like to use that word here, but that might be one we need to address. Then again, he spoke about housing, implying that the PPPC did not have a housing policy. Remember, it was under Mr. Green, who was the then housing minister, that the Ministry of Housing of the PNC was scrapped. I'd just like to bring these things to the attention, especially of the younger folk here and the younger people listening and looking at us. Another inaccuracy, the PPPC had a housing minister. As a matter of fact, our present president was the Minister of Housing and Water. So those are 2 little inaccuracies I want to get over before I lose my voice cords. A little swelling or a little not infection, but a little too much speaking over the past few days. Guyana is getting back on track, Mr. Speaker, after stressful and tenuous tenure of the 8th AFC coalition. I'll just expose 2 of their lies, and I'd like now to turn to the budget. The budget currently engaging our collective here, and which is delivered by this Honorable House by the Minister, is one which was diligently, from all appearances, prepared by his hard-working team. And I'd like to join with those of us who recognize the hard work of that team, and most likely going into the nights and getting all the details and having to double-check them and triple-check them and so on. Thank you to that team. And this budget is one of the main tools of returning Guyana back on track at this present time. So I'd like to thank them for that. The budget, like all other budgets, is a costed plan. In other words, it's not just wishes that you want to give to the public or give to an audience, a particular audience, but you need to know where you're getting the funds, the monies to provide those things. So this is a costed plan, the budget, and it's coming at a challenging time. I'd like to remind you that this is a time when we're having the constraints in the economy and on basic life of the citizens brought on by the COVID pandemic. And this has enveloped and, as a matter of fact, smothered Guyana, not only enveloped, it is more than enveloping. It has smothered us, it is damaging the economy, and it is, of course, creating many other issues that we'll have to confront. Even mental health issues. Probably we are not fully aware of it, but there might be some mental health issues coming out of this stress. You notice, for example, there's an increase in domestic violence. My theory is that it's not that domestic violence will go in automatically, but it has been increased, it has become more brutal, spouses killing each other, not in the usual way of probably 1 or 2 chops, but brutality, multiple stabs and so on. So we are at particularly difficult times, and I'm happy that the Minister of Finance has been able to present this plan that is so detailed that I would want to close my eyes and support it. The government has already addressed the public health threat of that is pre-existing. That is, the budget is being presented at a peculiar time. Not only is there COVID, but the government and the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance are already having to put lots of resources on that epidemic of non-communicable diseases, chronic non-communicable diseases. So our population is at a stage where they're susceptible to that. Chronic non-communicable diseases means diabetes or sugar, pressure, hypertension, and such things. They take a big slice out of our budget. And that's what we might refer to as the pre-existing conditions against which Dr. Singh and his team at the Ministry of Finance had to find monies to conduct the battle against two threats, two public health threats. The epidemic that was pre-existent and that unfortunately Guyanese were not aware of. We eat as we like, we drink as we like, but it's catching on, the changes are catching on. So I want to thank Ms. Dr. Singh for being able to generate funds and find the funds for the COVID response, even after doing such a great job, right, which was interrupted, of course, by the 5 years of the PNC in the fall, after doing such a great job of putting us, not a stop, but putting a spoke in the wheels of the growing epidemic of the chronic non-communicable diseases. Thank you for that. The government of Guyana had taken care to ensure that the monies being, or the funds being, and the efforts being given for COVID were not at the expense of the pre-existing epidemic of non-communicable diseases. Again, I must repeat, thank you, that's a great thing. In other words, both of the public health threats are provided for in this budget. We see more clearly where additional COVID things or COVID-related funds are being given. But if you look again, you'll see from the medical point of view, from the health sector point of view, that the chronic diseases are also taken care of. In other words, you would not want to save our granny from COVID, and then we would not like to lose a granny or a grandfather to the, or save them rather from COVID, only to lose them to the NCDs, like cancer, diabetes or pressure. So we have to take care of both. And I want to commend the ministry and its team for having been able to find a wherewithal, find the internal resources to do that. Congratulations on behalf of the medical profession, the health sector, and of course Guyanese, especially those who are suffering from chronic diseases. Now, I, on my own behalf, would like to recognize that particularly that this is something good to be done, and that the doctor must be recognized for it. Yes, the minister and team were engaged in a lengthy process. We see it not only in the health sector, but in other areas. So I want to thank you, Minister Singh, and many of the things that I can repeat here were already mentioned by our speakers on this side, and I would like to reinforce that by supporting them. I'm confident that you and the Ministry of Finance Budget team met other stakeholders, and that you are as diligent with them and mindful of their concerns as your team was when you met the health sector. In other words, this is not something being pushed down our throat. There was necessary time given to suggestions from the various line agencies. It's the term I think they use now. And so we want to thank you for that, and hope that the other ministries will also endorse my comments on this regard, that the Ministry of Finance did take consideration of the suggestions, recommendations of the line agencies. Now, before I continue to some of the good things that are in this budget, the responsible minister, I'd like to turn to some of the things that we discovered, some of the negative things that we discovered. My few examples to show what we are facing with, what we're trying to repair, the damage that we have to repair, right? The confusion, the lack of leadership, lack of vision, and so on. Simple ones, right? The storage of tons, big stock of lubricants by this administration in a building that was virtually a dwelling house, totally unsatisfactory, but they were there stored. And what's more, when we took over, we found that that item was almost expired, near expiry date. So because of that, we did further searches, and we found that this was not only one item, but they were in many different locations, ill-equipped and inappropriate for the storage of medications and medicines. We had similar concerns. So we're still looking at the damage that has been done, and probably we never have enough time and resources, especially human resources, to do the final tally. And people wonder now in the Ministry of Health, is it worth doing that? We've already lost these things. They're almost expired. I give you only one of the more glaring examples with not condoms, with the lubricants, right? What were they doing with so many lubricants? Who ordered them? There seemed to have been confusion. Many different people ordering or doing the same work. So we're putting that in order, the bond, or what you call it, the material management unit. Now, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, rather, the health sector is being funded, the physical structures, we've seen that you have more equipment is being bought and new equipment, and I see there's an effort at standardization. I want to thank the minister for that. But at the same time, I want to say that equipment by themselves and even the best medications cannot do the job of providing us with good health care. You have to have the nurses, the doctors, and the personnel. And I'd like to note this, especially on behalf of the nursing profession, that there's been adequate resources to train and upgrade nurses. So what the government is doing, what the ministry has been doing, is not only creating the physical things, the infrastructure, not only providing the medications, but training. And that's a key component of the approach of the PVTC. It has always been emphasis on training. And this is being done currently in this budget and a continuation of other budgets from other times among the nursing profession and the doctors. So that's the new programs that have been added to the academic spectra of these two sections of the workforce. I'd like to thank the minister for that, and I'd like to use it to highlight to the doctors and nurses that the cost, many of these programs are free of cost to the participant, to the person who benefits, the beneficiary, and sometimes we take it for granted. But this is a good time to remind Guyana, remind the parents, remind the recipients of this training, that is the nurses and the doctors, that they have a great duty to pay back this with good service to the Guyanese people. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've taken up a few minutes, and I think this is where I will stop. I think that's where I'll stop. We touched on the two major, the frontline workers of the nurses and doctors, and I'd like to recommend that we give them all the recognition necessary. And remember, they're the first who are needing the protective gear. They're the first who are needing, I want to talk of incentives, but they're the first who needing to have our recognition. Let's congratulate them. And I'd like, in the meantime, to fully endorse your budget and thank you for the great work. And not only that, the approach to listening to the people and the activists and the various stakeholders in the health sector. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, that concludes our business for today. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first let me extend a happy 54th Republic anniversary greetings to yourself, staff, all members of Parliament. And I take this opportunity now, Mr. Speaker, to move the adjournment of the Assembly to 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable members, let me join the Prime Minister in extending Mashimani greetings to you and your family, to our staff, the media, and all of Guyana. Thank you very much. The Assembly stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on the 24th of February.